An open letter to the people of Southern Africa by a child of humanity. Invocation. Between memory and awakening. People of the South, the descendants of stone and struggle, the inheritors of resistance. I write not as an accuser, but as a mirror, not to condemn, but to remember, not to divide, but to dignify. We, who once lifted the sun of liberation upon our backs, now find ourselves eclipsed by its shadow. Our flags of freedom flutter above economies in decay, institutions hollowed by corruption, and hearts numbed by promises deferred. Once, we sang of unity. Today, our anthems echo in hunger. Once, our liberation parties bore the hopes of the oppressed. Now they preside as custodians of privilege and architects of silence. This letter arises from that paradox, the dissonance between the liberation dream and the lived reality of disillusion, the discourse of disillusionment. The political architecture of Southern Africa stands upon the ruins and relics of anti-colonial triumphs. Liberation movements, once sacred names in the lexicon of freedom, have ossified into hegemonic structures of patronage. They have transformed the vocabulary of revolution into the grammar of power. Empirical studies and transparency indices reveal systemic corruption across the region, state capture in South Africa, gold smuggling cartels in Zimbabwe, and resource nepotism in Namibia. Yet, to see corruption merely as theft is to understate its existential violence. It is the slow asphyxiation of public trust, the erosion of ethical imagination, and the institutionalization of despair. It is no accident that our democracies wobble. Elections, once the ritual of renewal, have become spectacles of manipulation. Technocratic masquerades choreographed by elites and endorsed by fatigued citizens. Malawi's peaceful transition and Angola's selective prosecutions hint at democratic potential. Yet even these are islands in an archipelago of malaise, human rights, and the betrayal of liberation. What then became of the moral compass that once guided our liberation struggles? Freedom House and Amnesty International continue to chronicle the erosion of civic space. Journalists imprisoned, activists tortured, and civil society offices burned in the night. In Zimbabwe, dissent is branded as treason. In Eswatini, protest is punished as profanity. Such acts represent not the survival of liberation, but its betrayal. They reveal a tragic metamorphosis. The freedom fighter who feared tyranny becomes, over time, its mirror image. Ubuntu, revisited, philosophy as praxis. The philosophical heart of this letter beats with Ubuntu, the idea that umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu, a person is a person through other persons. Yet Ubuntu must evolve from sentiment into structure. Too often, it is invoked as cultural ornamentation while the social body starves. Scholars of African humanism caution that Ubuntu, in its uncritical form, can mask hierarchies, patriarchy, cloaked as harmony, silence masquerading as peace. Therefore, I propose a critical Ubuntu 2.0, a reimagined ethics that confronts power, democratizes compassion, and embeds accountability into governance. This is not nostalgia for a communal past, but a blueprint for a just future. Toward a political reawakening, the ethic of humanity. We must now articulate a new moral economy, one grounded in humanity, the dignity of being human in a time of systemic dehumanization. To be human is not merely to exist. It is to recognize one's codependence in a network of mutual flourishing. Therefore, let us move beyond moral rhetoric to structural reformation. Let us demand ethical reconstruction, institutional independence from partisan capture, civic literacy, citizens equipped to decode propaganda and demand evidence-based governance, economic decolonization, redistribution of opportunity, not merely wealth, through inclusive innovation and education, transnational solidarity, regional accountability through a reformed SADC human rights mechanism. Only then can human values cease to be an elegy for lost virtue and become an instrument of collective renewal. Youth as the epistemic vanguard. To the youth, whose bodies bear the burden of joblessness and whose minds flicker between hope and exile, I say, you are not the footnotes of history, you are its next authors. Across the continent, movements like #EndSARS in Nigeria, #Fees Must Fall in South Africa, and pro-democracy campaigns in Eswatini demonstrate that generational courage can pierce the veil of fatalism. Your tools are not only ballots, but bites, not only protests, but paradigms. Refuse cynicism. Reclaim your future through civic imagination by building data-driven movements, ethical businesses, and transparent institutions. A final admonition to power. To those in office, presidents, ministers, commanders, and custodians of the state. Remember, legitimacy is not inherited. It is renewed daily through justice. You may command armies and control narratives, but you cannot suppress moral entropy. Power without humility decays into fear, and fear breeds instability. As I write, the winds of history whisper, no regime can imprison the human spirit indefinitely. Epilogue, a theology of hope. This letter is not an indictment. It is an invitation to remember the sacred covenant between freedom and responsibility, an invitation to restore the moral architecture of our nations through a politics of empathy. Our liberation was never meant to end with sovereignty. It was meant to begin with solidarity. So let the cry of humanity rise again. We are because we care. We care because we are. May this remembrance become resistance, and this resistance become rebirth. Signed, a child of humanity and witness of a broken promise. #Munhu @MwanaWaNyamunhu. www.munhu.online.